let's just put it out there. I think Lando 2.0 is here. Laura Winter on F1 TV asked a phenomenal question in the post-race show, and she said, would the Lando Norris of 2024 have won this race in changeable conditions with Max Verstappen pressurizing from behind? Would the Lando Norris of 2021 have won this race? I mean, we saw Sochi 2021 as a glittering example of what could go wrong in changeable conditions. And it's evident, Kunal, McLaren and Lando have come such a long way. I mean, the decision-making today, yes, it seemed indecisive, but ultimately they made the correct call. And even after they were bullied by Max Verstappen, or rather pressurized by Max Verstappen, they didn't get bullied like they were last year. Lando stood his ground, and he worked on the one thing that we all claim to be his biggest weakness in 2024, the starts and the restarts, because all of them were timed perfectly today.
Yes, they were timed very perfectly today. I think Lando was also aided by the fact that it is very difficult to overtake around the Albert Park circuit. So, it's easy to sort of get away with making little mistakes. That's what they were also talking about the cool down room where Max said there was just no place. You said Max bullied him, and of course you corrected yourself. But I still think Max didn't get a chance to bully him because the McLaren has, what we spoke about all along in the offseason, that the best way for Lando Norris to win a race, to dominate Formula One, to hopefully win the World Championship, is to have that slight margin in performance. And I thought we saw that with the McLaren package this race in Australia. And I loved Australia for two reasons. It gave us a glimpse of what McLaren's pace advantage is in the dry as well as in the wet, and maybe somewhere in the mixed conditions as well. And that McLaren was ferociously quick. And what that then allows you as a driver is it gives you a little more leeway when you make certain mistakes, which every driver does for that matter. Even if your favorite driver is not Lando Norris and it's Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton, they make mistakes. It also gives the team a little bit of more comfort when it comes to strategy. I think McLaren and Lando Norris was spot on with their race strategy, with their race communication. There was something very refreshing about them, very confident, very calm about how they were going, about with the proceedings. And contrasting to last year, if you just see, what we saw with them last year, there was like panic. Oh my God, we need to make a decision. And what do we do? And should we just do what we think? Or have you checked the Twitter feed? Have you checked on Reddit telling fans, fans telling us what to do? And I think that calmness also came through. The only thing that I wished wouldn't have happened was when they called for papaya rules and they told Oscar to stay back and not attack and whatever. But we can dissect that later. All in all, I think this was a great race. Lando Norris 2.0, 2.250, whatever you call it. I really hope this stays because that seems like a quick car. And, I'd love to see what Norris is able to do with all the hype that's been created around him this season.
So then we were speaking about this on the phone, right? About Lando and how that decision actually was made. Because to the outside world, it might seem like he was a little tentative about the call of switching from dry tires to the inters at the end. But they timed it perfectly. Apparently, Lando Norris got that call the moment Oscar and Lando started to slip out on the final couple of corners of the circuit.
Yeah, and I think although McLaren have received a lot of criticism for the way they communicate, I think it was a very important to and fro between the engineer and the driver, exchanging ideas. Because, see, in a dry race, I always believe, or what it largely seems is the case, that the team has as much information as possible. But when it comes to wet races, although the teams have data at their side, you still have to ask the driver how he feels in terms of grip, in terms of instinct. So that to and fro of ideas exchanging does tend to happen around races like this. And I felt that was very normal. And eventually, they timed it perfectly. We've seen throughout last year, McLaren has seemed very tentative. They've tried to wait and see what other teams do because then they would always do the overcut. They would always do a pit stop a lap or two later and then they would lose out. This time, they timed it perfectly. There was a little bit of a luck element as well because Lando did go off track, but eventually he did retain the lead. But one thing I really want to talk about Lando is the redemption arc of Lando. 2 years ago, first race of the season, he was the last classified finisher, P17. Okay, right now he's the race leader. He won this race, and 12 months ago, I put out a stat about Lando Norris saying that he has the most podiums without a race win. The thing is, Lando, when he started off in 2019, he started off with the likes of George Russell, Charles Leclerc. Max Verstappen was there for a couple of years. And when these drivers started getting a lot of success in terms of podiums and wins. The question was always there, when is Lando going to step up? When is McLaren going to step up? He spent 5 years with McLaren without a win. And by that time, you see a lot of drivers move away. They're already frustrated. He still wanted to go ahead with McLaren, and look what it's brought him over the last several races. 9 poles in the last 16 races, 5 wins, each better than the previous one. And the first thing that came to my mind after the race win is he's come a full circle from Sochi 21. Sochi 21, full wet conditions. That was arguably the greatest driver of that generation, hounding him. They made a strategic error. He bins it. 4 years later, it's the same thing. Wet conditions, the greatest driver of this generation is hounding him throughout the race. He does not bin it. You can also talk about Abu Dhabi, where the title is on the line. These 2 races really show the sort of class that Lando has reached over the last 12 months. I didn't believe that he was a championship contender until this race. I think I might have to change my perspective now.
Yeah, this means that I have won the bold prediction competition. So have you, Sundaram. You also predicted that Lando's going to win. So that's phenomenal. No, you didn't?
No, I predicted that Charles is going to win, but we will talk about that later.
We'll get to that later. But it's phenomenal. It's like, as you rightly mentioned, Lando Norris has come full circle and he's growing, Kunal. You know, the development arc of every driver is so different. They all don't grow in a very linear way. Some people take their time to get there. I mean, we famously saw Damon Hill winning a world championship in his 30s, even though he came to Formula One that much later. With Lando, you can tell that he doesn't sound that confident when he speaks to the media, but that's just how he communicates. Maybe his way of thinking is different. Maybe this is the style that my generation of people resonate with, because we don't talk the same way as the people of the last generation do. But ultimately, it's not about what we say. For me, it is, because that's my job. But for people like Lando, it's about what they do in the car, and every single thing they did was perfect. But this is phenomenal. Lando is now properly evolving into a better driver, nailing the starts, good in the strategy, keeping Max Verstappen behind, not making mistakes, good in the wet. What more can you ask from him? And he also got pole position this weekend with only 1 qualifying run. He didn't have a banker lap. And even then, Kunal, he was phenomenal. So throw weather at him, throw Max Verstappen at him, throw Oscar Piastri at him, whatever it may be, Lando has hit it all out of the box for a 6. It's phenomenal.
I love the cricketing analogy. But Lando also had the support of Papaya Rules, at his disposal this race weekend, which is what we said in the preview, that, the 2 teams with 2 Alpha number 1 drivers, McLaren and Ferrari, could they use team orders at the very first race weekend? And, well, McLaren did that. And I kind of support what they did. And I love how, again, 72 hours ago, pretty much everyone was still questioning if Lando Norris has it, doesn't have it. And now suddenly everyone's like, oh my God, that's where my championship contender is going to go. I'd love to see how that turns out, because it would be a great transformation, not just in terms of numbers, as Sundaram put it, but also in terms of the evolution of the human personality as well as the psychology. And Saumil, one thing that really stood out, and I said this before, is the clarity with which McLaren and Lando went about doing their business. And yes, Lando gives very funny answers. A lot of his humor is very British humor, which is absolutely fine, which can be misquoted, misunderstood, all of that. But all in all, I think the one big difference I've seen this season, and even more so in Australia and after the race, as Lando said, yes, we are title contenders. Yes, we're going to have good races. In fact, we're going to have better races than what we had in Australia at certain times. And yes, we made progress. So he's sort of confidently putting it out there, which I think is very bold, and also embracing the pressure that comes with putting it out there. Maybe that's what happened last year. Everybody made him a title contender before he thought he himself was a title contender. And now he's like, you know what? I'm actually ready to be a title contender, even if you don't think I am. And you nicely pointed out he got pole, he's had wins, he's got back-to-back wins for the first time in his career. I think back-to-back race winner ever since Max Verstappen and Red Bull started to dominate, because they pretty much won everything as well.